The first thing my son asked after I sold the farm wasn't whether I was relieved. He asked when he could have his share. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I'd spent 41 years running a cattle farm outside Lexington, Kentucky. My wife, Carol, had died 4 years earlier, and after one bad winter and a knee that wasn't getting any younger, I finally sold the land. After taxes, closing costs, and the last equipment loan, I had just under $900,000, enough to retire comfortably if I didn't do anything stupid. My son Grant apparently had other plans. 3 days after closing, he and my daughter Rebecca showed up at my house without calling. Rebecca put her purse on the kitchen counter. Grant stayed standing. "We need to talk about the sale money." That wording caught my attention. Not your money, the sale money. I poured myself coffee. "What about it?" Rebecca went first. Her catering business had lost 2 corporate clients. She needed $55,000 to cover payroll, vendors, and a tax bill. Then Grant told me about a real estate investment near Louisville. He needed $140,000. I looked from one to the other. "So together you're asking me for almost $200,000. Grant pulled out a chair. "You've got close to 900. I stopped with the coffee halfway to my mouth. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "We know what the farm sold for." "You don't know what I owed." Neither answered. That bothered me more than the requests. I had never told them the final number. Rebecca tried to move past it. "Dad, nobody is asking you to give away everything." "Good." I sat down. "Because I'm not giving either of you money today." Grant's face changed immediately. "We're not strangers." "I know. This farm was our family. The farm was my job. And eventually, it would have come to us." There it was. Eventually. A polite word for after I died. Rebecca shot him a look, but Grant kept going. "You don't need $900,000 sitting in a bank. I might live another 20 years. You won't spend all of it." I stared at him. He seemed to realize too late what he'd said. Rebecca stepped in. "Mom would have helped." That landed differently. Carol had helped both kids over the years. More often than I'd known at the time, I suspected. But she wasn't here to answer for those decisions. "I'll look at your business numbers," I told Rebecca. "If there's a real way to fix the company, we'll talk." Then I looked at Grant. "And I'll look at the property deal." His shoulders relaxed. "But I'm not promising either of you a dollar." The relief disappeared. "Why do you need to investigate everything?" he asked. "Because it's $140,000. You've always trusted me. I trusted you enough to ask what I'm investing in." Grant pushed his chair back. "Forget it." That was my first clue. A man with a legitimate investment doesn't usually get angry when you ask to see it. Before leaving, Rebecca touched my arm. "Just don't make any big decisions yet, okay?" I looked at her. "What big decisions?" She hesitated. "With the money, moving it around, changing things." "Changing what?" Grant opened the door. "Come on, Rebecca." She followed him out. I watched them drive away, then went into my office. The closing folder was sitting on my desk. I opened it. The settlement statement was there. So were the tax estimates. But the page showing the exact net proceeds had been moved to the top. I always kept it behind the closing statement. Maybe I'd moved it myself. I didn't think I had. That evening, I changed my online banking password. The next morning, I called my bank. I wasn't accusing anyone of anything. I simply asked whether there had been any unusual inquiries since the farm sale. The manager put me on hold. When he returned, his tone was more careful. Mr. Bennett, someone called yesterday asking about your account balances and transfer limits. Who? They identified themselves as a family member. My hand tightened around the phone. Did you give them anything? No. That helped. Then he added, they said they may be submitting documentation authorizing them to act on your behalf. What documentation? A power of attorney. I stood up. I haven't signed a power of attorney. There was a pause. Then I recommend we place an additional verification requirement on your accounts. Do it. I hung up and immediately called Rebecca. She answered on the third ring. Did you call my bank? Silence. That was enough. Rebecca? Grant did. Why? He's worried you're going to do something impulsive. With my own money? Dad, that's not what I mean. Then explain it. Her voice dropped. He talked to a lawyer. I looked at the closing folder on my desk. A lawyer for what? Another pause. To make sure somebody can step in if you aren't making good decisions. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Rebecca, did Grant ask you to sign anything? No. Did he send you anything? This pause was longer. Yes. What? A form about you. I sat down. What kind of form? Questions about your memory, your health, whether you've changed since Mom died. The money was no longer the part that concerned me most. Send it to me. I don't know if I should. Then tell me one thing. Did you fill it out? No. Good. My phone buzzed 30 seconds later. A screenshot arrived. It was a questionnaire from an elder law office. Most of it was ordinary intake information. Then I reached the last section. Someone had typed a note beneath the questions. Father recently liquidated major assets and is refusing reasonable financial assistance to his children. We are concerned his judgment may be deteriorating. I read it twice. Refusing to give my adult children $195,000 had somehow become evidence that I couldn't manage my own affairs. Then another message from Rebecca appeared. Dad, there's something else. Grant told me if you won't cooperate voluntarily, he has another way. I didn't call Grant. I called the attorney who had handled the farm sale. Melissa Hart had represented me for 12 years. She knew my finances, my family, and more importantly, how much I disliked unnecessary drama. I forwarded Rebecca's screenshot. Melissa called 5 minutes later. Did you contact this elder law office? No. Did you ask Grant or Rebecca to act for you? No. Then don't sign anything they bring you. What can Grant actually do? Not nearly as much as he's making Rebecca believe. Being your son doesn't give him control over your money. That was reassuring. Her next sentence wasn't. But if he's trying to create a record that you're incompetent, document everything. So I did. The bank inquiry, the questionnaire, the messages. Then I asked Melissa to review my estate documents and remove any outdated access my children still had. I wasn't punishing them. I was closing doors that should never have been open. That afternoon, Rebecca called again. I need to tell you why Grant is doing this. I'm listening. The Louisville property isn't real. I leaned back. What do you mean? The development exists. His investment doesn't. Grant had shown her the same brochure he planned to show me. Rebecca had searched the address afterward and discovered the unit he claimed he was buying had already been sold. So why does he need $140,000? I think he's in debt. How much? I don't know. Rebecca, I really don't. She sounded frightened now, not defensive. He borrowed against the house. His wife found out last week. That explained desperation. It didn't excuse what he'd done. What about your business? My problem is real. I know. And I shouldn't have gone along with him. Went along with what, exactly? She hesitated. He asked where you keep the spare key. I stood. Did you tell him? I thought he wanted to check on you. Where, Rebecca? The magnetic box behind the propane cover. I walked to the garage while she was still talking. The box was there. The key wasn't. A locksmith came that evening. After he left, I checked the house. Nothing valuable appeared missing. Then I opened the filing cabinet in my office. One drawer was slightly out of alignment. Inside were old tax returns, insurance records, and loan documents. I couldn't prove anyone had touched them, but I knew something else now. Grant had access to my house. He knew approximately how much money I'd received, and he had been discussing ways to control it before I ever refused him. The next morning, Melissa told me to check my credit. There were 2 recent inquiries I didn't recognize. One came from a regional lender. I called. After 20 minutes of verification, a fraud specialist confirmed an online loan application had been started in my name. It hadn't been approved. It used my home address, my social security number, and an email account that wasn't mine. Can you tell me the email? I asked. She read it. I recognized the username immediately. Grant had used a version of it since college. I closed my eyes. Flagged the application as fraud. When the call ended, I froze my credit. Then I sat at my desk, looking at the family photograph beside the computer. Grant was 22 in that picture. Rebecca was 19. Carol stood between them. For a few seconds, I wanted a simpler explanation. A mistake. A misunderstanding. Something I could fix with one conversation. My phone rang. Grant. Dad, we need to meet. About what? You know what? I'd rather hear you say it, he exhaled. Rebecca told you everything, didn't she? Not everything. Silence. Then, I'll come Sunday. I have paperwork that solves this. What paperwork? A temporary power of attorney. I won't sign it. You haven't even read it. I don't need someone who applied for credit in my name managing my finances. The line went completely quiet. I hadn't planned to tell him I knew, but now I had. When Grant finally spoke, the confidence was gone. Who told you that? The lender. Dad, I can explain. Sunday, 2 o'clock. I ended the call. 10 minutes later, Rebecca sent me a message. Grant just called me. He's furious. Then another. He says the loan application wasn't for him. I typed back, then who was it for? Her answer came almost immediately. He won't tell me. That evening, Grant's wife called. We hadn't spoken in almost a month. Her first words were, Mr. Bennett, please don't give Grant any money. I gripped the phone tighter. Why? She started crying. Because $140,000 isn't enough. I waited. How much does he owe? Over $300,000. That number changed everything. Then she told me where the debt came from, and it had nothing to do with real estate. Grant hadn't lost the money on a property deal. He had lost it trying to save his job. His wife, Lauren, told me he worked on commission for a commercial equipment company. 18 months earlier, one of his largest customers had started buying through a small distributor Grant had quietly invested in with 2 co-workers. The arrangement went bad. The distributor couldn't pay suppliers. Grant borrowed money to keep it alive, because if the company collapsed, his employer would discover his involvement. How much, I asked. About $320,000 now. From banks? Some. That word mattered. Where did the rest come from? A private lender named Russell Kane. I wrote the name down. Does Grant owe him personally? Yes. And Kane wants his money now? By next week. Now the $140,000 made sense. It wasn't an investment. It was a payment Grant hoped would buy him more time. Lauren lowered her voice. He told Russell your farm was being sold. I stood up. What exactly did he tell him? That you were going to help pay the debt once the sale closed. I never agreed to that. I know. Does Russell know? I don't think so. There was one more question. Lauren, why are you telling me this now? Because Grant asked me to say you promised him the money. That was the moment his problem stopped being something I could solve with a loan. He wasn't asking me to rescue him anymore. He was asking people to help rewrite what had happened. Sunday, Grant arrived carrying a legal-size envelope. Rebecca came separately. I let them sit at the kitchen table. Grant pulled out a document. Read it before you say no. The title was Durable Power of Attorney. I almost laughed. You called this temporary. It can be revoked. By me. Yes. Then why do I need it? Grant leaned forward. Because you're making major financial decisions without talking to anyone. Selling my farm took 14 months. I'm talking about afterward. Rebecca picked up the document. Her eyes moved down the page. Why is only your name here? Grant looked annoyed. What? You told me we'd both be agents. It was easier to list one person. She turned another page. This gives you access to his bank accounts. That is what a financial power of attorney does. And his property. Rebecca, please. She put the papers down. For the first time, she looked less like Grant's ally and more like someone realizing she'd been used. I asked him directly, "Did you apply for a loan in my name?" "No." "The lender has your email address." I started an inquiry. With my social security number. I was checking options. For whom? He didn't answer. Rebecca stared at him. Grant. He rubbed his forehead. I needed to know what Dad could qualify for. The room went still. Not what he could qualify for. What I could qualify for. You were trying to borrow against my credit. I didn't complete anything. You submitted enough to create a hard inquiry. I was going to explain. When? After I knew it could work. That answer was so clean it almost impressed me. He had planned to find out whether he could use my financial position first. My permission could come later. I slid the power of attorney back toward him. Take this. Dad. And leave. His face tightened. If Kane comes after me, I could lose the house. Then get an attorney. I need money, not an attorney. No, you need both. You're just not getting the money from me. Grant stood. You have nearly $900,000. And none of it belongs to you. His hand hit the table. Not hard enough to break anything. Hard enough to make Rebecca flinch. You'd rather watch your son lose everything? I looked at him. I'd rather not lose everything with you. That stopped him. Rebecca slowly pushed her chair back. Grant, let's go. He grabbed the envelope. At the door, he turned around. You think you're protecting yourself? I am. No. You're destroying this family over money. Then he left. Rebecca stayed behind. I didn't know about Lauren, she said. Or the private lender? No. Or the loan application? She shook her head. I believed her about those things. But she had still helped him. You gave him my spare key. I know. Did he ever ask for documents? Her eyes shifted. There it was. What documents? Last month he asked if I had a copy of your social security card. Why would you have one? Mom gave me copies of family documents years ago when she was organizing everything. Did you give it to him? Rebecca looked down. A scan. I didn't say anything for several seconds. I thought it was for estate planning. That explained how Grant had gotten the number. It also meant my children had shared my identification without asking me. Anything else? No. Think carefully. She did. Then her face changed. He asked whether your house was paid off. When? Before the farm closed. That was worse. Grant had been looking at my house before he knew whether I'd give him money. After Rebecca left, I called Melissa. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "We're past precaution now. I want you to check whether anyone has tried to borrow against the house." The county records showed no new lien. That was the good news. The bad news came from the second lender on my credit report. An application had been started for a home equity loan. Requested amount, $250,000. My house had been listed as collateral. Nothing had closed, but someone had entered its estimated value, my income information, and the fact that I owned it free and clear. I forwarded everything to Melissa. Then I called Lauren. "Where is Grant?" "I don't know. He left after he got home." "Did he take anything?" She checked his home office while I waited. When she came back, her voice had changed. "Yes." "What?" "A folder with copies of your financial records." My eyes went toward my filing cabinet. "Anything else?" "There was an old document in there with your signature." "What document?" "I don't know. I only saw it once." Then she said, "Grant told me it proved you'd agreed to guarantee his debt." I had never guaranteed $1 of Grant's debt, but apparently someone had a document saying I had. The document appeared the next morning. Not from Grant. From Russell Kane. He called just after 9. "Mr. Bennett, I think we need to speak." "About my son?" "About something he gave me." I asked him to email it. A minute later, I was looking at a one-page letter dated 4 months earlier. It said I had agreed to guarantee up to $250,000 of Grant's obligations. My name was signed at the bottom. The signature looked close. It wasn't mine. I called Melissa. She studied the document while we were on the phone. "Did you ever sign anything for Grant's business?" "No." "Ever tell this man you'd guarantee the debt?" "I've never spoken to him." "Then don't contact Grant yet." She told me to preserve the email and send her every message I had. 20 minutes later, Kane called again. "Is the signature yours?" "No." He was quiet. "Grant told me you signed it at your house." He lied. That answer seemed to settle something for him. "I need to be clear," Kane said. "I loaned Grant money because I believed his representation that family funds were backing him. That's my mistake. But if this document is false, we have a different problem. For once, someone involved wasn't asking me to solve Grant's debt. He was looking at the facts. Send my attorney everything Grant gave you." "I will." Before hanging up, I asked one question. "Why did you suddenly check with me?" "Because yesterday Grant brought me copies of your tax returns." My grip tightened around the phone. "He said they proved you had the resources to honor the guarantee." Those were my records, the same kind Grant had been searching for. I called Rebecca. "Did Grant have access to the old farm office?" "He still has the spare key from when he helped you move equipment." I had forgotten about it. Most of my files were already home, but several boxes remained there until the new owners took full possession Friday. I drove out immediately. One box had been opened. The folder containing older tax returns was gone. So was a loan application that included my Social Security number. I didn't need another family conversation. I called the sheriff's office and reported the missing documents. Grant called while I was still at the farm. "You reported me?" "I reported my records missing." "You know what that does to me?" "Bring them back." I gave them to Russell. "Then tell the deputy that." He went quiet. Finally, he said, "Dad, I'm trying to keep my life from falling apart. And every time you try, you use another piece of mine. I can fix all of this if you help me." "How?" "Pay Russell. I'll handle the rest." There it was again. One check. The same solution he'd wanted from the beginning, except now I understood what that check would actually buy. It wouldn't fix his problem. It would cover the latest lie. "What happens after I pay Russell?" I asked. "I get time." "And the bank applications?" "I withdraw them." "The document with my signature?" He said nothing. "What about that, Grant?" "I made a mistake. You forged my name. I wasn't going to let you lose anything." That sentence told me he still didn't understand. "You already did." "What?" "You lost my trust." For once, he had no answer. I ended the call. That afternoon, Rebecca came over carrying her business records. "I met with an accountant," she said. "And? If I borrow more money, I'm probably just delaying the closing." A week earlier, she'd wanted $55,000 from me. Now she was finally looking at the problem instead of my bank balance. "I may shut it down," she said. "Then shut it down properly." She nodded. After a moment, she asked, "Are you going to help Grant?" "No." "Even if he loses the house?" "Yes." She looked uncomfortable, but she didn't argue. Then her phone buzzed. She read the message and handed it to me. Grant had written, "If Dad goes through with this, tell him you were involved too. You gave me his documents." Rebecca's face went pale. "He's threatening me. He's scared. That doesn't make it okay." "No." She sat down slowly. "What should I do?" "Get your own attorney. Tell the truth about what you did and what you didn't do." She looked surprised. "You're not going to tell me it'll be fine?" "I don't know if it'll be fine." That was the most useful thing I could give her. The truth. Before Rebecca left, Melissa called. The second lender had provided additional information about the home equity application. It hadn't been completed, so my house was safe. But the application included something we hadn't known: a phone number for a supposed financial advisor authorized to discuss the loan. Melissa read me the number. I recognized it. Not Grant's. Rebecca did too. It belonged to Grant's business partner, Eric Dalton. Until that moment, I had assumed my son had created this mess alone. He hadn't. And if Eric was involved in trying to borrow against my house, Grant's $320,000 debt might only be one part of what they were trying to hide. Eric Dalton gave me a reason to slow down. Not because I trusted him. Because if Grant had a partner involved, I needed to know what I was actually dealing with before I made another move. Melissa contacted the lender and asked that all records connected to the application be preserved. Then she gave me simple advice. "Don't investigate Eric yourself." I wasn't planning to. "Good, because Grant may already know you're asking questions." She was right. That evening, Lauren called. "Grant came home. How is he?" "Scared." I waited. "He and Eric have been arguing. I heard enough to understand something." "What?" "The home equity application wasn't Grant's idea." That didn't make him innocent. "What was Eric's plan?" "To use your house as security for a short-term loan. They thought they'd repay it after selling their interest in the distributor." Without telling me. "Yes." "And Grant agreed?" Lauren hesitated. "Yes." That was the part that mattered. Eric might have designed the plan, Grant had still supplied my information. The next morning, Grant showed up at my house. He didn't try the door. He knocked. When I opened it, he looked exhausted. "I need 10 minutes. You have 5. He nodded. No argument this time. We sat on the porch. "Eric told me the application was just to see what financing was available," he said. "You gave him my information." "Yes." "You gave Russell a document with my signature." Grant stared at the yard. "Yes." It was the first time he'd admitted both without an excuse. "How much trouble are you actually in?" He rubbed his hands together. "The distributor owes about $600,000. Your personal share? Between the loans and guarantees, maybe $350. And Eric? More than me." That explained why Eric had been willing to use my house. "What happens if the distributor fails?" "My company finds out I had a financial interest in a vendor I was sending business to." "And you could lose your job?" "Yes." "So this wasn't about saving an investment." He shook his head. "It was about hiding what you'd already done." Grant looked at me. "I thought I could get out before anybody knew." There was nothing dramatic about the sentence. That made it worse. "How did you expect the power of attorney to help?" His face tightened. "I thought if you signed it, I could move enough money to pay Russell and replace it later." There it was. The full plan. Not inheritance. Not concern about my judgment. Access. "How much would you have taken?" $200,000. Without asking me? I would have paid it back. "You already asked me." I said no. He looked away. That distinction finally seemed to reach him. I stood. "Grant, you need a lawyer." "I know." "And you need to tell Melissa exactly what documents you used." "Will you withdraw the fraud report if I do?" "No." He nodded slowly. For once, he didn't try to negotiate. Before leaving, he turned back. "Are you cutting me out of the will?" A week earlier, that question would have made me angry. Now it only sounded sad. "I haven't decided." He accepted the answer. Then he drove away. 2 days later, Melissa called with the piece we'd been missing. Eric had contacted the lender directly. He'd represented himself as someone helping manage my finances. But the lender's notes showed something important. Grant had been on the call. He had confirmed that Eric was authorized to speak. That ended any possibility that Grant had simply been manipulated by a business partner. He had participated. Melissa asked what I wanted to do about my estate plan. I looked out across the empty field behind my house. "Make sure neither of my children can control my finances while I'm alive. And after your death? Leave that alone for now." I wasn't going to rewrite my entire will while I was angry. That would have been another emotional financial decision, exactly the kind Grant claimed I was making. But I did make one permanent change. If I ever became unable to manage my affairs, neither Grant nor Rebecca would have sole authority over my money. An independent fiduciary would. Family could still be family. Access was different. That night, Rebecca called. "Grant hired an attorney." "Good. He's also going to tell his employer." That surprised me. "Why?" "His lawyer told him they're likely to find out anyway." For the first time, Grant was doing something that made his immediate situation worse, instead of creating another lie to postpone it. Then Rebecca added, "Dad, Russell agreed not to pursue you. He never had a valid claim against me." "I know. But Grant admitted the guarantee wasn't real." That mattered more. Not because it erased anything, because he'd finally stopped using my name as his escape route. I thought that was the end of the worst part. It wasn't. The following morning, Lauren sent me a photograph. She had been cleaning out Grant's desk for his attorney. Underneath a stack of business records, she'd found a handwritten list. At the top was my name. Below it were 4 assets: farm proceeds, house, retirement account, life insurance. Beside each one, Grant had written an estimated value, and beside the total was one sentence: enough to make everyone whole. The date at the bottom was from 3 months before I sold the farm. The handwritten list bothered me more than the loan applications, not because of the numbers, because of the date. 3 months before the farm sold, Grant had already totaled what I owned and decided it was enough to repair the damage he and Eric had created. I sent the photograph to Melissa. Then I called Grant. "Lauren found your list." He knew immediately which one. "I can explain that." "I don't need an explanation. I need one answer." "Why is my life insurance on it?" Silence. Finally, he said, "I was calculating everything. Everything I own. Yes. As money available to you." I was panicking. That wasn't an answer, but it was probably the truth. I asked, "When did you first decide the farm sale could solve your problem?" "Before you listed it." That stopped me. "What?" "You'd been talking about retiring. I knew you were thinking about selling. So you borrowed money expecting I would eventually bail you out?" "Not at first." "When then?" He took several seconds. "When the distributor started failing." Now the whole sequence made sense. Grant hadn't fallen into trouble after I sold the farm. He had built his escape plan around money that wasn't his before the sale even happened. The fake investment story came later. The power of attorney came later. The loan applications came later. They were all attempts to force the same assumption into reality. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" "Because I knew what you'd say." "What?" "That I created the problem." "You did." "I know." For the first time, he didn't fight me on it. Then he said, "My attorney wants me to cooperate." "With your employer?" "With everyone." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "And are you?" "Yes." "Even about Eric?" "Yes." That was going to cost him. Maybe his job. Maybe much more. But it was the first decision he'd made in months that wasn't designed to push the consequences onto somebody else. Rebecca came over that evening. I showed her the photograph. She stared at the list. When she reached the life insurance line, she put the phone down. "I don't like seeing that." "Neither do I." "Do you think Grant wanted something to happen to you?" "No." I answered quickly because I meant it. This wasn't that kind of story. Grant hadn't wanted me dead. He had simply stopped seeing my assets as mine. In his head, they were family resources waiting to be used. Rebecca sat quietly. Then she said, "I did some version of that too." I looked at her. "With the store. I knew you had money coming, and I started thinking about what it could fix for me before you even had it." That admission mattered. Not because her behavior equaled Grant's. It didn't. But the entitlement had started in the same place. "What are you doing about the store?" "Closing at the end of the month." "You sure?" "No." She gave a tired smile. "But the numbers are." That sounded like progress. Over the next 2 weeks, Grant's situation moved without my involvement. His employer suspended him while they reviewed his relationship with the distributor. Russell Kane pursued repayment directly from Grant and the business. The lender kept the fraudulent application closed. My house remained mine. My accounts remained untouched. There was no dramatic courtroom scene. No sudden arrest in my driveway. Just lawyers, documents, interviews, and consequences arriving one at a time. Then Grant asked to meet. We sat in a diner outside Lexington. He looked like he hadn't slept properly in days. "My company terminated me," he said. I nodded. "I figured they might. Eric says this is all my fault now. What do you say?" Grant stared into his coffee. "Some of it is." "Some?" He looked up. "Most." That was closer. He told me his attorney was negotiating how to address the false financial applications and the forged guarantee. He and Lauren were preparing to sell their house because they couldn't carry the debt anymore. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. "If I lose the house, will you help Lauren?" "Help how?" "Give her somewhere to stay. Maybe help with a deposit." That was different from asking me to erase his debt. "She's family," I said. "If she needs reasonable help, we'll talk." His eyes dropped. "And me?" "You're my son." That wasn't my question. "No." I let the silence sit for a moment. "If you need food, a place to sleep, or help getting back on your feet, I won't pretend you don't exist." He looked at me. "But I will not pay the debt you created. I will not reimburse Russell. I will not protect you from your employer. And I will not lie about what happened." Grant nodded slowly. "I understand." I wasn't sure he fully did, but for the first time, he wasn't asking me to change the answer. Before we left, he said, "I thought losing the money would be the worst part." "What is?" He looked toward the parking lot. "Knowing you had to protect yourself from me." That was the first apology he gave me that didn't contain the word "but." It didn't repair anything. But it gave us somewhere to begin. And I still had one decision left to make about what would happen to the farm money, and whether either of my children would ever have access to it again. I didn't make that decision at the diner. I waited. A month later, Rebecca closed her catering business. She sold the equipment, negotiated with vendors, and took a purchasing job with a hotel group. She never asked me for the $55,000 again. Grant and Lauren sold their house. The proceeds didn't erase his debts, but they reduced them. His attorney worked through the remaining financial mess, while Grant found a sales job with a smaller company. For a while, our conversations were mostly practical. "How's work?" "Fine." "How's the knee?" "Still attached." Nothing deep. That was all I wanted. Trust doesn't return because somebody says the right thing over coffee. It returns when enough ordinary days pass without another lie. Melissa and I eventually finished my estate plan. I didn't disinherit either child. I also didn't give either of them control over my finances. If I became unable to manage my affairs, an independent fiduciary would handle the money. My children could inherit someday. They could not treat inheritance as an advance. That distinction had cost us months to learn. As for the farm proceeds, I kept them invested for retirement. I replaced my truck because it had 240,000 miles on it. I took a fishing trip with an old friend. I repaired the house. That was about as exciting as my new life became, and I liked it that way. About 8 months after everything started, Grant came over on a Saturday morning. He helped me replace 2 rotten boards on the back steps. When we finished, we sat outside with coffee. He looked across the yard. "I've been making payments to Russell." "I know. Lauren and I are still together." "I'm glad." He nodded. Then he said, "I used to think you refusing me was what destroyed everything." I waited. It wasn't. No. I'd already done that. There was nothing for me to add. A few minutes later, he asked, "Do you think you'll ever trust me again?" Not the way I did before. He absorbed that. But maybe differently. He looked at me. "What does that mean?" "It means I can love you without giving you my passwords." Grant laughed once. So did I. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a perfect bow. It was better. It was honest. Rebecca arrived around noon with sandwiches. For the first time since the farm sale, both of my children sat at my kitchen table without asking what I owned, what I planned to spend, or what they might eventually receive. Nobody mentioned the $900,000. Nobody mentioned the will. Nobody asked for a check. When Grant left, he stopped at the door. "Dad?" "Yeah? I'm sorry." He had apologized before. This time he didn't explain why he'd done it. He didn't mention pressure, Eric, Russell, his job, or fear. Just 2 words. I nodded. "I know." After they drove away, I locked the door and put the spare key back where I keep it now. Not outside. Not somewhere my children know. Some people might call that unforgiving. I don't. I spent 41 years building something valuable enough that my children eventually began counting it before I was finished using it. What happened afterward taught me something simpler than revenge. You can help your family. You can love your family. You can even forgive your family. But the moment someone decides your money belongs to them because they expect to inherit it someday, you have to make one thing clear. They can be part of your life. That doesn't make them owners of it.